that you got to see before this was meaningful in communicating the importance of you testing your idea. And the reason I say this is because the reason I emphasize so much being able to test your idea is because everything we do is usually an assumption. So some of the languages that are very helpful for us when you're building businesses or building products is to remember that everything you're doing is a bet. You're betting that if you do this, then X will happen. But it's not always that we have our bets correct. So you need to make sure that the bets we have made, we need to test those bets. So one mantra that I found very useful while building products is to say you're wrong until you're proven right. So you're wrong until you're proven right. Now, the best way to be able to do this is to do something called a hypothesis framework. So design hypothesis for your assumptions. I think that kind of the video kind of slightly touches on it, but my hope is we can do that practically together today. So the way this is going to work is, I believe you have all received a framework template that we're going to use during this session. And the idea is that we fill that together. And then I will encourage people to share some of their hypotheses during the chat session. And then we can co-create them together. So we can give you feedback on the parts of on how you can improve your hypothesis or ways in which you can make sure that your hypothesis doesn't have holes in it and it can make it easier for you to run a business. So I'm going to share my screen now. Just give me a moment to get started. So let's get started here. Hold on a minute. I forgot to give permission to Zoom to be able to view my desktop. So I just do it now. It looks like I may have to jump out of this. So Vicky, I'll ask you on your side, do you have the template for the framework? Are you able to present your screen or should I drop off and then get back on to share the screen?
Just give me a minute.
So I won't show you my screen and instead we will rely on Vicky's screen to be able to view this.
Okay, I think I have it. Let me just share my screen.
All right. Good. Fantastic. So this is a framework I want us to be using today. So here's what I want us to do. So the way you design your hypothesis is you have key components. So you're thinking about who are you building for? So I hope for all of you guys, I hope everyone at least knows what um, what user you're solving for, whose problem you're working to solve. So that's one thing that we want to start off at this point. So you're going to start by who are we solving our business for? So right now, just take a sticky and write down on your side who your user is going to be. So, and then the next thing we're going to do is you're going to look at what are we proposing, what feature or what product or what process, how are we planning to be able to solve this problem? And the next thing we'll be doing after that is what the outcome is. So what I mean by outcome is what is going to happen as a result of you being able to solve this problem for the user. And then very important with any hypothesis, it's good to have numbers because what you don't want to do is you don't want to come back to the end of your hypothesis and it becomes an argument of, oh, but what is good and what is bad. You don't decide that at the end. So it's very important that we decide upfront what number we will need. So the human brain has a really funny way of being able to lie to itself. And when you don't decide this number upfront, then you end up lying to yourself. So now, the next thing that I want you guys to do is to kind of think about when, how long do you want to run this hypothesis for? So this is helpful in terms of being able to know, in the case of our awesome carpooling business, if we do it after 1 week and we don't have users, is it good enough? How long are we going to try? Are we going to do it for 2 weeks? Are we going to do it for 1 month? How long do we do until we decide this is not working and it's time for us to move on? So, so we're gonna do this collaboratively, all of us. So let's start with, so everyone has a sticky ready, or in the very least, you have a way to write this down. So what I want us to do as the first thing is I want us to be able to look at who the target customer is. So the target customer, what you want to do is you want to try and be as specific as possible. So Vicky, if you could go to the next page so we can see what the sample. So this is an example that I filled for awesome carpooling business. So this is an example of what this looks like. So now there's a couple of things I want to mention here. And I don't know how many of you, let me just actually tell you a quick story. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember this, but there was a time about 8 years ago when there was a craze that was happening in Kenya. There was people starting what was called the quails business. And quails are these things that they look like chicken. I shouldn't say the chicken family. And they have these eggs, and there was a craze because quail eggs were in demand. I don't know what was happening. And everybody was going to start a quail business. And all you heard in town was how much money people are making doing this quail business. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to do this. This is quick money. Let's go in and start rearing some quails. And I remember a friend asked me, do you know anybody who eats quails? I said, no, I don't. And he asked me, do you know anybody who eats quail's eggs? I told him, no, I don't know anyone who eats quail's eggs. And he said, then you probably should not go and start a quail business if you don't know anyone who consumes quail products. So the first thing you're kind of asking yourself is, who am I solving this problem for? Now, it helps a lot to be as specific as possible. The thing with being specific is, yes, even if you're building a business that can be able to serve everyone, it's very important that at the beginning you narrow down to a very specific user segment. So in the case of our awesome carpooling business, we're saying we're going to start with young professionals. And the reason also why it's so important to narrow down your business to a certain segment is because oftentimes it helps you to be able to look at the channels in which you can access these users. The really famous example we have is Facebook. When Facebook started, their focus was on university students, college students. And so their main channels of acquisition were college forums. That's where they could be able to acquire their users. So those initial users try and make them as specific a demographic as possible, even if later on you will expand your product to be able to be used by more users. Think about it. If you're going to be targeting, if you're going to make a product or a business that serves matatu drivers, where do you find matatu drivers? You go to matatu circles or you go to matatu stages. So you can be very specific about where you're going to go target these users. So in the very beginning, let's try to be very specific with the user we have in mind. And for those of us whose businesses are already serving multiple users, for the sake of this exercise, let's just pick one particular user segment in mind. Write them down, try and describe them to as much detail as you can. So as you can see on the screen, for my awesome couple in business, I've picked down 25 to that 5-year-old commuting between the neighborhoods of Ruaka and Westlands in Nairobi. They are earning X amount of money per month, and they commute to work using a certain medium. So already I've kind of identified and I know where to find them. So the next thing we're going to do is the change. So this is your proposed product or feature or solution. So in my case, what I'm proposing to them is a private commute option. So what I'm saying is I'm going to provide them a comfortable and affordable means of private commute. It's going to cost no more than 3 times their normal commute fare or fee, and it will have a fixed pickup and drop-off point. So a big hypothesis is that the fixed pickup and drop-off point is important to the people that I'm targeting. So all these are parts of the hypothesis. Now, at this point, it's not really important. You go in and you describe the solution in great detail, because what is just important is the key benefits of the solution. So the impact. So the impact can either be impact to you or impact to the user. So as you listen in the case of OkHi, the video that was given, the impact was OkHi is going to reduce the time it takes to move things from point A to point B by 40%. So that was the impact to the user. In this case, I'm thinking about the impact because, so if you're in problem validation, if you're validating your problem, in most cases, it's going to be the impact will be the impact to the user. So if your solution is successful, this is the impact you'll have to the user. But if you're in solution validation, that is to mean you've identified that there's a big problem, and now you're going on to building the solutions, the impact might be impact to you. So this is not a hard and fast rule. So it might change based on context and based on hypothesis. And I hope when you see examples of hypothesis, we're going to see examples of both. So the impact here, I've chosen to be the impact of our business, which you're saying is 20% of all trial customers will sign up to ride for a full month. So assuming we give a trial to 100 people, I'm saying that 20 of those will pay to be able to use our private commute option for a month. And the number of users I'm going to use, I've already mentioned that, is going to be 100 customers on trial. Now, there's a question here, which is when and after how long. So in this case, I say 3 months, but this just really depends on how long you need to be able to see traction, to be able to see other people actually using my product. In fact, I have to accept that I made a mistake here, because given that this is a product that is being used on a daily basis, 3 months is probably too long. You probably have a really good insight even within a week. So to be fair, you can say 2 weeks just to see variance within days. Or a month, if you want to say, do things change at the beginning of the month versus the end of the month versus the middle of the month? A month would actually be good enough. So 3 months here is too long. So you just do the shortest amount of time you need to be able to get enough data to be able to prove this. All right, so now what I want us to do, like I said, I want this to be very collaborative. What I want you guys to do is I want you guys to go through this, and I'm assuming you've been able to fill out all these sections. So now we're going to go to the hypothesis statement. So if we scroll down a bit on the document where we can see the hypothesis statement. So this is the hypothesis statement. So the hypothesis statement really falls out of this notes that I have here. And it just says, young professionals commuting to and from work by matatu will pay a monthly fee to access a more comfortable and reliable private alternative to matatus with a fixed pickup and drop-off point. It's slightly wordy, I know, but I'm actually trying to fit the who, the what, the impact, the how many and the time into this statement as much as you can. So I'll just say the young professionals, that's the what. Young professional commuting to and from work by matatu, that's the who we are focusing on. And then they will pay a monthly fee to access a more comfortable. So they pay a monthly fee as the impact. More comfortable and reliable private alternative is the solution we're offering. So what I want us to do now is I want us to kind of collaboratively within the chat section, take a stab at your hypothesis, send in a hypothesis statement, and then together we'll be able to kind of show you how you should be able to improve this. If you guys have any questions at this point also, please feel free to ask them. Is there any of these pieces that do not make sense to you? Ask them so we can be able to fix this together. Yeah, so I think what actually also be important is just for all of us to share our hypothesis, and then we'll pick and choose from those hypotheses. So, and don't worry, I usually say that if you're not embarrassed of your first product, you're taking too long to be able to, you're taking too long to launch your product. So I really expect that your first hypothesis, you should be embarrassed of it and it needs to take some improving. Great. So I have a first question coming in here, which is, which steps should a startup business entrepreneurs use or method for their customers to sign up? Um, so I'm going to defer this to the panelists because I feel that this may be off topic a bit. But I don't know if there's other sessions that are focused on this, or do the panelists feel I should answer this question?
Yeah, go ahead, Wes, no problem.
Right, cool. So again, like I said before, if you're looking for a startup business
Hey guys, sorry for that interruption. Let's give Wes a few minutes to join us again. I think it's just internet manenos. Hey Wes, karibu.
Oh.
Please unmute. We can't hear you.
How about now?
Yeah, it's clear.
Fantastic.
Karibu.
Right. I apologize, guys. Yeah, faux pas of video conferencing. Yeah, so I think, like I was saying before, to the question that was being asked about how you sign up your first customers, use your family and friends to get your first network of customers and get them to sign up. Here's a simple rule of thumb. Any, you know 10 people who are like you. So all you need to do is get the first person to use your product, and then ask them for referral to another 10 people who are like them. Now, there's no hard and fast rule of how you can acquire customers, but one of the simple things I would say is for those of you who are doing your problem validation, the people who you validate the problem with, use them as your first customers. And it was the same thing for us at OkHi. The businesses that we used to do the problem validation, we came back to them as the first customers and said, oh, guys, look, remember the problem we were discussing? Remember how we saw that you're losing so much time on your deliveries? Here's a simple solution for that. So use the people you validated the problem with as your first customers. Calvin, does that make sense? So it's done with your hypothesis. Can we start sharing? All right. So I'm going to share. Like I said again before, I'm hoping that all of you guys are be embarrassed of your first hypothesis. So share it as quickly as you can. Let me just share my hypothesis here. Oh. All right. So awesome. We have a hypothesis here already by Timothy Nene, who asks, and also guys, when you're sharing your hypothesis, just please include what type of business you're running. Just put a hyphen in the type of business. So I'm going to reshare mine and add this. So I've included the type of business that I have. I've shared my hypothesis there, showing the type of business that I have. All right. So we have a really interesting one here. Hope we just get back to it. Hope I've not lost it by Timothy, which is organizations with services that can be outsourced will use a trusted online platform to connect to affordable, quality freelancers. Now, I like it, Timothy. You've covered who you're focusing on, and you've focused on what the product is. One of the things I would do is focus on the impact. So what I would like you to do is, when you say organizations with services that can be outsourced, if you can, try and be more specific is what kind of services. I think with that user segment is it's too broad. So outsourcing IT services is very different, for example, from being able to outsource marketing or being able to outsource operations. They are all both very different kind of products. So try and be specific there. So you can say, or think about which user segment you want to start with. So here you can say that organizations with a high IT cost center will be willing to outsource their IT services to reduce costs. We'll be able to outsource their IT services to quality freelancers. So try and be able to point out who it is and what exactly is the value that, or the impact that they're going to get. Right. So bear with me if I don't pick all of this, but some really, really great ones that are coming here, which is a hypothesis. It's city dwellers with access to online shopping. They subscribe weekly or monthly for ready-made local meals and or fresh farm produces with efficient and convenient delivery to their doorstep at no extra charge. Okay, that's fantastic. First of all, the hypothesis that you have there. So you've kind of identified who you're focusing on and what you're offering them, which is efficient and convenient delivery to their door at no extra charge. I love that you mentioned that there. So a couple of things that I would add there is you said city dwellers. Again, for me, I feel it's too broad. If you think about people who are in the city, be more specific. Think about who can afford to buy your goods in Nairobi. Here's a quick interesting thing. In Nairobi, we have about 4 to 6 million people, depending on whether it's day or night and who's asking. And so 4 to 6 million people. Of those 4 to 6 million people, how many people can actually be able to buy groceries online? And then you go like, how many people are actually going to be able to buy groceries online? And then here you're thinking about, that means they're online, first of all. That means they have a smartphone. That means they're internet savvy enough to be able to order groceries online. And then 2, you need to be thinking who actually doesn't have the time to be able to go to a shopping mall to be able to buy groceries. So try and be as specific as you can with your user segment. Start small, start with a specific user group, and then grow from that user group. Again, there's a lot of this, which is the user segments are so broad. So someone here says citizens, citizens doing business. That could be anyone. How many Kenyans? How many people in the population are doing business? Be more specific. Remember, the more specific you are with your user, it really tells you where your which channels you should use to access your users. So let me put it this way. If my target is people who just came out of high school, where do I target them? Which of the social media platforms are they more likely to be on? How can I find them? If my target is my mom and my dad, they're people who are in their 50s and 60s, then I'm not going to go and put an advert on TikTok because they will not be there. So the more specific I can be about the user group, the easier it is for me immediately to be able to see which channels I'll be able to find those people. So try to be specific with your user group. There's one really good one here from Esther Google doing Smart Fast Aid. I love it. So she said, corporate wellness administrators. That is brilliant. That's fantastic. So corporate wellness administrators. So already she's kind of defined what size of a company is going to have a wellness administrator. So already she already segmented her market by just that very simple definition of the product. So corporate wellness administrators who are tasked with providing wellness programs to their workforce. So that's great. It's very specific. It's really narrowed down those kind of people. Will purchase bulk subscriptions to an on-demand, lightweight, fast-paced training to equip their workforce with life-saving skills. That is brilliant. The only thing that I would encourage you to add there, Esther, is a number if you can. So if you can say, for example, 50% or 20%, because if you get just one wellness administrator to be able to sign up, is that good enough? And it's okay if this is not within part of your hypothesis statement, but at least I'm hoping at least when you're defining your hypothesis, you put in numbers somewhere as you're doing that. Maybe the panelists can also help me to pick out ones that are particularly interesting and need review, because I'm seeing there's a lot here. Some of them are really, really good. Okay, so one here that says, hypothesis, guys stuck in traffic, commuting back and forth to work, preferably between ages 18 to 35, will enjoy action mobile games. That's really nice that you're doing your user segment. What's the hypothesis? Unless the hypothesis is that there is people between 18 to 35 stuck in traffic who enjoy action mobile games. That could actually be a hypothesis by itself. But please frame it that way as a statement saying that there are people 18 to 95-year-old stuck in traffic who enjoy action mobile games.
Hey Wes, there's also the one by Jacqueline Wamboy, the one that says small retailers.
Right. So here it says small retailers selling common consumer goods who, brilliant, I love that you identify that, will pay a small fee to connect with different wholesalers and manufacturers to get affordable products. This is brilliant, Jacqueline. When you say small retailers, that's the only thing I would kind of encourage you to be a bit more specific, but who is a small retailer to you? And it doesn't have to be here. It can be defined outside of your policies statement, but it's super, super important that that you can define that, i.e. who's a small retailer to you. Yeah, and Jacqueline, I can tell you, without revealing too much, but that's a very, very interesting problem and a very interesting segment. And I can tell you that it's already being validated, that problem. So if that is your business, then you're onto something very interesting. Yeah. Okay, cool. So there's one which is interesting here from Cyrus, and interesting because I want to unpack it a bit. I wish you had said what kind of business you're trying to build there, Cyrus, but it is entertainment lovers in Nairobi will have an exclusive African films video on demand service at 75% the amount they spend on cinemas and other streaming services. Assuming you validated there's a need for African films. So first of all, go out and validate the assumption that people have a need for African films. And very easy, you could just do that with a survey. You could go in and try and find out the African films on Netflix. How much airtime are they getting? You can even do that with your friends. Find out 10 of your friends who are on Netflix and ask them, hey, have you watched that show? That film that's on Netflix. There's African movies on Netflix. Ask them, hey, have you watched this show? This African show on Netflix. They say yes or no. And just do a quick survey with your people and kind of get in the bottom of why they watch those films as well. And first of all, they demand. I want to be biased and say there is demand. but I'm not your target audience. So do this validation with who your target audience is, or maybe I'm your target audience. But yeah, for sure there's demand for African film. And then you're talking about amount they spend in cinemas and other streaming services. So I want to kind of push back to you on that one because um, it's too broad, cinemas and other streaming services. It is really, really too broad. Um, and also you don't want to, I don't want to go into pricing, but when you're doing your pricing and thinking about how you think about pricing, do not base your pricing based on your competitors solely. Like, yes, your competitors are a good thing to look at, but no, that's ideally not how you do your pricing. Do value-based pricing. And value-based pricing means that if I'm providing value, I can be able to charge people a service and then see how much you can charge them. Try and charge them as much as you can and see, oh, okay, wow, you're still asking for people for 2,000, they're still paying. We ask for 5,000, they're still paying. 10,000, they'll still pay. So try and see how much you can be able to charge people for value. If later on a competitor comes in and starts charging people lower, then you still have room to play to go lower with your pricing. But at least don't do your pricing. So there, I'll come back to and just say, look, hey, African, you pick maybe a segment and you say African movie watchers are willing to pay a premium to watch African content, for example. That could be one example. Or to pay for a streaming service serving African content. And then go in and test out, put out a website saying, "Woohoo, this is a African film service." Don't even build the service itself. Just go in and build it. Put a sign up button, and then put in a button that says watch this. Put all the most popular movies in Africa. Send these out on social media. See how many people sign up. So that's a very simple experiment you could run. And actually, I want to emphasize one more thing to you guys. As you're thinking about this hypothesis, you don't need to go out and build the product to be able to test your hypothesis. I think I emphasized that before. Oftentimes, you can just be able to do something dirty that kind of shows you people are going to come to your service. If you want to test whether you can build a barber shop and people will come to the barber shop, just go and rent out a space. Don't buy a barbershop chair. Rent out a space and write barbershop. Put in a nice fancy picture. Do people actually come to inquire where is the barber? Yeah, that's one way you could be able to test this hypothesis. So remember that. Think about really easy ways to test this without actually having to invest money into what you're doing. Another one here is SMEs will acquire insurance solution at affordable premium through a flexible means for their peace of mind and financial security. Again, SMEs is quite broad. And also, what do you mean by SMEs? Who's acquiring the insurance? And what is insurance for? Insurance is a very broad solution. You have car insurance, health insurance. You have asset insurance, accident insurance. What kind of insurance are you providing them? So be a bit more specific with your product when you can. You don't always be able to be super specific, but be as specific as possible. And in this case, insurance is too broad a solution. And so try to be a bit more specific on what that solution is. So please keep revising this. Share your revised hypothesis. I always call version 2. So even if I've not reviewed yours, just share version 2 of it. Similar to Caroline, I love the fact that you're trying to very specifically in your post when you say young people 18 to 45 years old with other commitments. Do you mean working professionals? Again, try and make the language as a bit more descriptive. That's a descriptive the word. Try and make the language descriptive. So when you say young people with other commitments, do you mean like working professionals? So kind of try and see that. One more thing I want to mention is for this hypothesis framework, I've tried to keep it as as simple as possible, because as you get started working on this, you you get better at being able to frame these hypotheses. But one more thing that was mentioned in the video that has not been accounted for within this framework, and intentionally so, is the failure metric. So a failure metric is really, really important to have. Um, and the failure metric is because, like I say, when do you need to know when to quit. And I'm not saying that it's not a good idea. It probably is a good idea, but there's many factors that go into the success of a business. Sometimes it's not just about how good your idea is or how good your solution is. Sometimes this is just timing that happens. Sometimes timing is just perfect. Think about someone who started their business and then Corona happened, and maybe their business was based purely on contact. So sometimes you want to see um, where their business. You want to know when to quit so that time is not a. So you don't spend too much time trying to do something which may be correct, but just it's the right product or the right business, just at the wrong time or at the wrong place or talking to the wrong people. So you need to have a failure metric. And I'm not saying failure metric says quit, stop doing your business completely, but failure metric says, okay, let's not do it this way, let's do it a different way. So if we start by selling tomatoes, we say, okay, we are failing at this. Maybe the problem is not the delivery of grocery services. Maybe the problem is the product is wrong. Tomatoes is not great because people want to select tomatoes. Let's not something that people want to select. Something like, I don't know, coconuts or pineapples.
Hello, George. George Ndungu. I can see your hand is up. Would you like to speak? George? Okay, sorry. He says it was by mistake. No worries. Okay.
All right. Okay, so I don't know, do people have other questions around hypothesis framework? Yeah, it's so good to see people kind of iterating their hypotheses. This is essentially what running a business is about. It's about trying one thing, trying it out. It's not working, you change it very quickly, and you move on to the next thing. The faster you can iterate on what you're doing, the higher your chances of success. Just remember the failure rate for us when we start businesses is really high. And I've been here before. I've made plenty of mistakes with businesses. And the trick to it is just go back and test as quickly as possible. Time is your biggest enemy. It's actually not money. Time is your biggest enemy. Because even if you have all the money in the world, you have competitors. And this is, every time you start something and people see it, then you have a million more. You start a good barbershop, a different barbershop concept. Tomorrow, everyone has a barbershop on the same street as you. So, um, time is your biggest enemy in this case. So, try and iterate as quickly as possible. So,
Okay. I can see Nesfori Mumbai. You'd like to speak? Nesfori? Hello, Nesfori?
yeah. Excellent.
Okay. I don't know. We can't hear you. Are you trying to speak?
All right. So let's move on to the next part. So you have your hypothesis, and I've seen all of you have really, really good hypotheses. Um, John, I've seen your question. I'll come back to it really quickly. But now you all have your hypothesis. So here's what we're going to share next. So you share your hypothesis statement, and within the same line, just include what your what your metrics are. What would be the measure of success? So let's go to the next step and share what would be your measure of success. How will you measure if your hypothesis is a success? So, like I said, if I go back to Esther had a hypothesis on corporate wellness administrators. So, how many? How many do you? How many? If you how many do you want to sign up to consider that a success? Somebody had a hypothesis on outsourcing of services. How many businesses do you want to be to outsource your business to you in a month, for example, in 1 year? So think about what your success metrics are. If you already have a failure metric, be able to share that. Okay, thanks. Cool. So yeah, so John, you're assuming by valuation you mean how valuable your business is, then that will be a session that will be upcoming later on in this series. So hang in there. Good. Kevin, thanks so much for sharing this, but I also want you now to include your success metrics. So what are your success metrics? How will you measure the success of your hypothesis? The number. Okay, cool. Sorry, I missed some of the questions that were in the QA channel, which is how do you tell when to keep pushing and when to pivot and when to quit? So again, so this is what I said. This is why the hypothesis helps so much because um, when do you keep going? When do you stop? Uh, Many years ago, when I started a business, and someone gave me advice, and they told me, look, the the key to having a successful business is keep the door open. Just keep the door open. Which what I mean is just keep going, no matter what. And yes, whereas first of all, I want to emphasize that yes, endurance is going to be really, really important. But you're not just enduring by blind faith. You also need signals to keep telling you that you're doing the right thing, right? So insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So if you are if you are if you're doing a business, whatever you're doing, you won't get some signal that whatever you're doing is right. And that's what these metrics are about. These metrics are about helping you know that, if you're seeing this data, we're doing the right thing. If we're seeing this, then we're doing the wrong thing. Which comes about the question, which is, how do you set a good failure metric? So I'll tell you something, Morage. So sometimes with a failure metric, it's sometimes the hypothesis is the way you set it, the failure metric kind of presents itself. So say, for example, we are going out to, let me go back to Esther's hypothesis, which was wellness administrators will pay for a first aid kit. So there, a failure metric could be assuming what is the number that she has. So maybe she goes out and she finds in total, there's about 100 wellness administrators. That's a total addressable market that you can be able to get from. If she cannot get more than 10 of those to be able to pay, so less than 10%, is that good enough for her? And sometimes what we'll be able to evaluate that is think about at what point do you need to be profitable. So if you have 100 people you're targeting, how many of them need to buy the product so you can be able to make money? That could be your failure metric. And sometimes the failure metric, by the way, I know I'm focusing on metrics and data now. Sometimes metrics don't have very hard metrics. Let me give you an example. I was talking to an entrepreneur the other day. They run one of the most successful Kenyan technology businesses today. And he said when they started, they went for a pitching competition. And they said, if we don't come out number one, we'll stop doing this. Because for them, they say, if we don't come out number one, it means people don't see this idea as good as it is to us. Now, I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong, but I'm saying what I just like is they had a metric in mind. It wasn't a hard metric. It wasn't 10 people. It was if this doesn't happen, then we stop doing this. So they had an idea about it. We're going to go for this pitch competition. If we don't come out number one, we quit this business and we go to something else. There's a question here, which is, Victor, I hope that answers your question on good failure metric. There's a question here from Nesperi, who was talking about how to break down your segment that you're targeting, which is targeting wholesaler and retailer. How do you narrow down because you've already identified them? Aha, brilliant. This is a good question. How do you narrow down when you have a very, it's very specific, it's wholesalers and retailers. So there's a couple of things that will influence this. And it really depends on your business strategy. So one thing that could influence it, for example, is geography. So if, for example, you're going to be focusing on wholesalers and retailers, try and focus in one place, because maybe there's logistics concern. Maybe it's actually quite expensive to be able to get goods to wholesalers and retailers. So you want to keep that down. So pick out the area where you have the most wholesalers and retailers. Say, I'm going to start with this neighborhood because that's where we have the most people. So that's where they're going to start. So that's one way to go in and do it. Another way to be able to do this is based on strategy. So like I said before, say, for example, we say we are going to start with Facebook as our sales channel. So in that case, you start with only with those guys who are on Facebook. Now, obviously, you're not going to have the sellers and retailers on Facebook, but assuming it was a different segment, for example, then you would start with the people who are within your segment channel. But actually, the simple trick that I have learned. So I wanted to make it clear that there's many ways to narrow down your user segment. And sometimes it's just because you have a very strong partner. Say, for example, you're doing, you get one big partner on board who does Unga. So it's a wholesaler who does Unga, and you get that. You already have one kind of retailer on board. Then go and get all other Unga people on board. So you can narrow down just based on the type of business, because all other Unga wholesalers will be similar. They'll be the same. It's just the name will be different, but it's the same product. You can move it the same way. You can group it together. So sometimes just be like your first big customer might determine which segment you focus on. But the simple trick that I learned, this is filthy. This will never fail you, this trick of segmenting. The people with the biggest problem, that's who you start with. So what I mean is, if you go in and you do a problem analysis on time spent on commute, and you find, you know what? People between this neighborhood and that neighborhood have the biggest time spent in commute. Start with that segment. That is your segment. So, or to extend this example a bit, let me go back a bit to Esther's example, which now has become my standard example for this. But corporate wellness administrators, you go in and you do it, and you find out actually the problem is bigger for businesses which have more than 100 employees, because they are more highly regulated. Then you start with those. The one with a bigger problem. But also it could be you go for it and you find out, you know what? Businesses with 10 people are easier to sell to because there's less people making decisions. So we're going to start with that. So there's no hard and fast rule, but the one that I know will never fail you is whoever has the biggest problem is probably the one who you start with. So I hope that makes sense. I'd love to see more people sharing more metrics here. So, so I look at some of your metrics. Um, Also, if you have any other questions, necessarily, I just assume the question you had was related to segmenting um, your wholesalers and retailers. Um, yeah. Is there everyone who shared a hypothesis? I want to see everyone taking an example and kind of sharing your metric. And one more thing that may be useful as you're thinking about your hypothesis, have a next step. If this succeeds, what will we do next? If this doesn't succeed, what do we do next? Have that identified in advance. The only reason for that is for those of you who are who have partners in your business and you have more than one voice, and you probably have everyone has a very strong opinion. You don't want to be discussing what you do next after um, you don't want to be discussing what to do next after the results of the hypothesis, because there it's influenced by your emotions. Oh yeah, we did get one person, but you know what? We can do this. So people will come up with all the reasons to justify um, why they should keep going. So I'm going to share an example of my failure metric. That's my metric. Hold on, let me just share my metric here. And then I'm going to share my failure metric. Cool. Perfect. I've seen a question. I'm coming back to the questions you guys have, but I've kind of shared my metric there, which I said, remember my young professionals committing to and from work. And I said my success metric, the goal of my metric was 20%. And so here I'm saying my failure metric is less than 5% of co-sign up. So that's my failure metric because I was just thinking, what's the number of people you need in a car for it to make sense for you to be able to move from point A to point B and allow you to iterate. So if I get less than 5 people, that's probably really small. I can't even fill up a small car with those. I mean, assuming one person doesn't come to work one day. So 5, it's a bit of an arbitrary number, but it's a number that for me, that'll be good enough that if I have those, I can iterate a bit. If I don't have those, then I'll go back and validate my problem again. I'll go like, maybe my problem was wrong. Let me go back and validate my problem. And if my problem is still correct, then maybe it's a pricing. So that's what I'll be looking at. Yeah, cool. So a similar thing with Esther here, we were saying 5% of farms will take pride. So for the affiliate metric is 5%. Guys, the thing is, and given the rule I told you, don't worry too much about this being, hard and fast food. It's just kind of a yardstick for you to stick to. You're saying, look, we just need a signal, and you just agree that if we don't see that, we will look at a different direction. Good question here, which is on is monitoring and evaluation part of the metric? Part of the metric is monitoring and evaluation part of the metric. So no, it's not part of the metric. It's part of the hypothesis. So one of the things that you're going into when you build this hypothesis is what's your process? What's your process? I did not want to go into measurement because that's a whole topic on itself by itself, and it's a broad topic. But you should, when you're designing even your product or your businesses, you should always have a way to measure how your business is doing and how your product is doing. So if you have a business, a barber shop, for example, I want to use businesses that are not even technology oriented. If I have a barber shop, then for sure I should be able to know how many people come in every day. Or it's a Sunday, on a given Sunday. Do you see more people on Sunday or more people on Mondays? Those are basic things you should know about your business. You should have a way to measure. So always implement ways of measuring your business. What you don't measure, you can't improve. So you just need to find a way of measuring everything, not just the hypothesis, but everything you're doing within your business. Yeah, question about fish farming as an example. And yeah, go ahead, ask a question.
Nesfer, you can speak. Hello? I think you may have a problem with your mic. Pole.
Yeah, well, Nesri is looking at the microphone. Let me kind of look at this metric that Kevin has put up here, which is insurance business success metric. 3 small, medium-sized enterprises take up Whitebox cover. So Whitebox is a big work and injury benefit cover. I think actually it's a legal requirement for businesses. And 5 medium-sized businesses take up 5 million to take up fire and burglary insurance covers per month. Okay, so here's what I would say, Kevin. Those are 2 different hypotheses. So ideally, a hypothesis should target a specific user group. So WIBA and burglary, those are 2 kind of different insurance, different products in 2 different hypotheses. The reason is there's actually even very different channels you will use. WIBA, for example, is already a legal requirement. So it's very easy for you to go in and to sell to businesses. So if businesses are not buying, it's not because they don't want it or they don't need it. It's probably because your pricing is wrong. And so there, you don't even need to validate whether it's needed. It's needed. The problem is the need is there. Maybe it's your cost that is the problem, or maybe your offering that is the problem. And that's very different from fire and burglary insurance, for example. And even the value proposition that you're offering is very different. That's why even if you go to an insurance company, any insurance company you go to, all these are often different divisions of the same insurance company. So these separate those 2 different hypotheses. Yeah, so there's a brilliant metric here by Washington, which is number of monthly subscribers, 1,000 to the system as users. The only thing I would say is that the problem with saying 1,000, the problem with having a fixed number is a fixed number. I would want to know what that fixed number is based on. Is that fixed number based on market sizing? Is that fixed number based on optimization? So like I said before, if I'm doing a carpooling business and I have 2 people, it doesn't make sense. I might as well run a taxi service because 2 people is too little. But if I have 4 people in the car, it makes sense. And I can carry 4 people in the car is free. So if you're going to have a fixed number, at least uh, I hope you know where that fixed number is coming from. If it's a fixed number, again, it's market size. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. But be clear about where that fixed number is coming from. If it's 1,000 people, is it based because there's 10,000 people in Nairobi, therefore you're saying 10%? If it's 1,000 people, is it 1,000 people because you're building a football stadium that can only accommodate 1,000 people? So be clear about where the number is coming from. Fantastic. Cool. I know there's a question on Nesri. It looks very, very interesting question, and he's still evolving. So keep going. Um, explain a bit more. Okay. Um, yeah, bear with me the silence. There is a question being asked on the Q&A channel, and it's taking a bit longer to type it out. So I'm waiting for that to evolve so that I can answer that question. Do people have any more questions around? Even I'm also happy to hear people who will challenge the importance of these metrics around the metrics and if you want to challenge these metrics, if you the hypothesis process, if you have a question about the who, what, or why, or the impact, please feel free. Yeah. So good question here from Esther, which is what are some easy sources of figuring out the total addressable market? So it pretty much depends on what your product is and who your target market is. Sometimes you can use what I call correlational data. So say, for example, you want to sell, a good example would be you want to sell I don't know, flat screen TVs. And then you want to sell flat screen TVs and you did analysis and you found out, one good signal to people who may be able to afford flat screen TVs is people who have internet. Oh, actually, that's a good idea. So you're selling flat screen TVs. People are buying flat screen TVs because they're going to watch Netflix on it. So who's going to be able to watch Netflix on it? It's people who have cable internet. So how do you get more cable internet? You go to CCK, Communications Authority of Kenya. They keep a record of internet subscribers across the different internet companies. And then you look at that and you go like, okay, cool. Total number of internet subscribers in Nairobi is 1 million. And they're growing at a rate of 2% per month. So within the next 10 years, we'll be able to have X millions of people in Nairobi who can be able to buy our flat boxes. So that's one simple. Sometimes just think of who is using your product and therefore what do they have in common. So for example, if you are looking at people who may be able to, for our awesome carpooling business. So all you need to find is find commuter numbers. Where can you find numbers of people who take matatus on a given basis? Sometimes you need to do it in a more dirty kind of way, which is to find a number that may be able to be broken down. So for example, you want to know how many maize farmers are there in Kenya. Now you don't know how that number is, but you find out, every year in Kenya, we grow 1 million tons of maize. The average farmer grows 5 tons of maize. So you do 1 million divided by 5 and you get a rough estimate of how many farmers you're looking at. So that's a thing to think about. But again, guys, I think we talk about addressable markets is that I'm personally not a big fan of the total addressable market because if you think about it, even it's very hard that you'll ever get 100% of your total addressable market. At the very best, if you're a dominant force within your market, you'll be able to get maybe about 40% of the total addressable market. So bear that in mind. I'm sorry, Neshri, I still don't understand the question exactly around fish farming. And what is the question? Is a question on how to measure? It's not clear to me. So if you could just type and tell me what the exact question is, that'll be really helpful. And I think also for people who are so there's two kinds of, like I said before. So first of all is you're trying to validate the problem. And then two, you're trying to validate the solution. If the hypothesis that there is a problem, okay, great. In that case, then what I really encourage you to do is try and quantify how big the problem is. If it's a small problem, are people going to be willing to pay for a small problem? And then I'll give you an example. You have an e-commerce business, and you go in and you say there's a problem that you have a hypothesis that e-commerce businesses are losing a lot of money because they are unable to do deliveries to Mombasa. So they're losing a lot of customers to Mombasa. So the first thing you'd ask yourself would be, how many customers do they actually have in Mombasa? So that's one of the things that I would push you guys to kind of ask yourself when you're evaluating the problem is, how big is the problem? Am I going to pay you for a small problem? Maybe not. So how big is the problem that you think there is? Try and quantify it. And the best way to quantify it is how much money people lose because of this problem, or how many hours are people losing every day, or how much pain is being caused by this problem. So try and quantify the problem. From a solution perspective, as I said in the video, what you just want to see is this the right solution? So when you're starting, it's important that you think about more than one solution to a problem. And there's always more than one solution to a problem. What they say is more than allows ways to skin a cat. I hope that's what I say. But there's more than one solution to the problem. Think through both solutions, test each of them, compare them to each other, and see which is the most efficient. Right. I'm not seeing a lot more metrics coming in the chat. I will just assume that that's because you guys are working on them. I would like to hope that it means that this is understood and we can understand how to be able to frame our hypothesis. If you have any questions around this or any concerns around this, then yes, this is your time now to ask. All right, so I guess the final question that is here, which is, Nefri, just correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're trying to understand is you're doing farming and you want to know what number is good enough to say what's a good success metric in terms of output, in terms of yield, and what's a good failure metric in terms of yield. So what I would say there is that there's a lot of things that will go into this, rather than just looking at the total deficit across the country. So what Nesfuri is talking about is that I'm doing fish farming. The total deficit in the country is about X tons. And how do I calculate which harvest I need to get to make this a success? What's supposed to be my success metric, the amount of harvest I need? So that is not going to just depend on what the deficit is across the country, because you can always scale things later. What that is going to be based on is essentially your yield. Like you have hypotheses of how much yield you can get. Say, for example, to use an analogy, which is exact business, but if I'm growing maize farming, I need to have a hypothesis on how many tons can I get per acre, and therefore I need to base my failure metric based on the number of tons I project I can be able to get in an acre. So if expectation is I can get 10 tons from an acre, and I end up getting 1 ton from that acre, is that good enough? So again, in this case, don't base your metric based on the total addressable market. Base your metric based on the current user segment or the feature that you're doing today. All right. Okay, so I think that's that. I'm handing it over to you, panelists.
All right. Thank you, Wes, for taking us through this session where we've been looking at how we can validate our business through hypothesis testing. I hope it's been useful to you guys. So I'd like to challenge you that as you go away and as you're sort of validating your business ideas, if in case you come across like any challenges, you're welcome to our office hours next week, which will be Wednesday the same time. So you can come through with your questions and engage directly with Wes. He'll be joining us then as well. As I mentioned before, there's no worries, like we'll be able to share all the materials that have been shared on this webinar for you